My name is Adam Barber, and it is a real privilege and a blessing to be here at Blondie. And this isn't actually part of my testimony, so this is free. I'm just going to throw it in there. My great-grandfather was named Oscar Barber. Now, he wasn't just an old-school alcoholic. He was actually the town drunk here in the fine city of Hohenwald. If you ever remember watching the old reruns of Andy Griffith, where they had Otis that was wandering around town, that was Papa Barber. Everybody knew that he was a drunk. And one such night when he was drunk, wandering the roads, he stumbled in, and I'm sure he stumbled into Blondie Church. And that night, Jesus Christ absolutely rearranged that man's world, saved his soul, and put his feet upon a solid rock and changed the path for the rest of his life. He went on to not only continue to stay sober, but pastor the church for well over 30 years until he could no longer stand, which was kind of hard on him because he used to play guitar in church at a little Pentecostal church out on Natchez Trace, and they said he would do a Chuck Berry duck walk across the stage. He really got into it, but he finally got to where he couldn't walk, couldn't speak, had to retire. But like I said, my name is Adam Barber, and I lived here up until I was around 8 or 9 years old. My mother married Dr. Sal Haney down in Perry County, so we moved to the big city. We moved from Hohenwald to Loganville. And not only did I have a fairly normal childhood, other than the divorce and the relocation, that is kind of normal anymore. I had everything that I could want. You know, I hear testimonies, I know people in recovery, different treatment centers, people from jail, and I hear such horror stories of growing up. How, my dad used to beat me, they left me, they didn't feed me. See, I didn't have any of that. I had all of my needs and all of my wants met. They gave me everything. But the problem with being given everything is you really don't tend to appreciate much anything. And I was just such a one. I was always looking for more. I felt like they owed it to me. The world owed it to me. I deserved to have everything that I wanted out of life, to be happy and just to have all my heart's desire. And that didn't really cause a lot of problems at that young of an age. There was no major behavior problems. No very young drinking drugs or anything like that. But right about the time that I hit 14, I found something that drastically changed the way that I felt. Now, it wasn't drugs at this time, it wasn't alcohol, but it was pornography. Now, we're not everybody here, but most everybody here is men. So you know that's not only socially acceptable in most circles, it's kind of a badge of honor with the guys. They know that if you've got magazines, if you've got movies at home, that's cool. They want to come to your house, because everybody wants to partake and view those sort of things. So that was my first foray into something that was changing the way that I felt. It was pornography. And I progressed very quickly in anything I do. Not bragging on myself, but that's good and bad. If I start doing something bad, I get really bad really quick. And if I get motivated to do something really good, I kind of go all in with that. And so that's how I was definitely all in when it comes to sin. So the pornography led to sex. And that's certainly socially acceptable, especially with the other guys. And everyone thinks that, you're cool. And, I wore it like a badge of honor myself that I was getting to have sex and sleep around. But like any type of sin, just like any drug, any alcohol, the feeling that you get, that rush of dopamine, that feelings of power, fulfillment, they don't last for long. You always have to seek something else. Now, as I'm sure as most of you know, with sex, that means you find another partner, another conquest. You have to get somebody else, and then the chase is on again once that's over. So I went through about 2 or 3 years, pornography every day, sleeping around. Not every day because I didn't have that much of a Mac Daddy kind of attitude, but it was still, I was, literally watching the pornography and delving into all sorts of perversion. And I went through most of high school without drinking until my senior year. Now, a friend of mine had some parents that were cool with that, so we went down to their house for a party for the weekend. Went to a local liquor store, and I got blackout drunk that first night. I remember taking my first mixed drink. I think it was bourbon and Coke. It may have been that. I can hardly remember. And I remember taking that first one, and that was it. The next thing I remember, I was waking up the next morning outside in the cold. Somebody was kind enough to throw a blanket over me. And I didn't remember what had happened, who I talked to, if I'd been anywhere. But every one of my friends was kind enough to tell me the stories the next day, how I humiliated myself. Now, once that sickness and that hangover passed, I kind of gave myself a little pep talk. I said, maybe you just didn't do it right. I mean, you're feeling so bad and you're hungover, maybe you just need to drink a little different. But above all, we're going to continue to drink because I like the thrill and the chase of getting to do something just as much as doing the act itself. So I started drinking every day. Nights, weekends, holidays. It didn't matter if I had an important task at my job. The next day, it didn't matter if I had family coming over. I don't know if any of y'all ever done that. When you've got all your family coming in and it's Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner, and all your family's like, you need to dress nice, you need to look nice, and then you show up kind of stumbling into everything, making a fool out of yourself. That became my normal MO of what I did every single day of my life. And like I told you, I progressed really quickly. Now, I didn't drink for 3 years, 5 years, 10, 20 years like I hear a lot of people do. Within 6 months of taking that first drink, I started taking pills. And I should have known the first time that I ever took any pain pills that there was going to be a problem. And not saying this to brag, but I want to just tell you what the facts around everything are. We were at a party, and one of my buddies was like, "Hey, we can buy these." I think it was Lortab. In fact, that was the thing. Anyway, back in Perry County, and all of my friends got them. We all went in together, and my buddies who had been drinking all night with me, they took one, or they took half of one. Everybody started to get sick. They started to throw up. A couple guys even passed out. I had all of mine that I bought because I had to show off, so I had to get more than everybody else. And I took all of them. Took the whole handful. And I sobered up. I've got all of my friends here that are passed out, that are sick, they're throwing up, they're stumbling into things, and I've now become a caretaker. I'm walking around the house and cleaning up after everybody. I'm in a good mood. I'm talking to everybody. And I should have realized at that point that that's not really normal. That's not really normal to take a handful of these pills like that and to all of a sudden kind of straighten out, or at least so I thought. But hey, I really enjoyed, for those first few months, taking pills. No one smells the alcohol on you. No one knows what you're doing. But I didn't do that for very long either. I think within 2 or 3 months, I started injecting morphine, heroin, and I quickly found out from the first time that I ever did that, this is what I want to do. I love the way that this makes me feel. I've always been, for my entire life, an exceptionally awkward person. I never felt comfortable in my own skin. It didn't matter where I was, who I was surrounded by, what was going on, I felt out of place. Now, you walk into a room like this with people that you don't know, it's the first time here, and all of y'all have experienced that. That's awkward, right? I felt like that all the time. I never really could fit in. But when I got high, I could fit in. I didn't care anymore. I've heard alcohol called liquid courage. Well, I took my liquid courage in a real concentrated form and got it all at once. And all of a sudden, I was sociable. I was confident. I thought I was good looking. Of course, that's debatable, but I felt like I was finally me. I felt right. But injecting morphine and heroin is not socially acceptable. It's actually not conducive to a successful life either. Because what starts out as a fun evening, a fun weekend, quickly takes over your life. And it wasn't long, I would say just within a couple of months, that my story is going to start to get familiar to all of you. And that's when I started the cops there in Perry County, will kind of leave you alone as long as you're not speeding too bad, or if maybe they know your family, they're not going to harass you. But you do enough stuff, and that is their job. They finally are going to say something to you. And it was really quick it was quick for them to find out, I'm showing up at all these dope houses, midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, in little tiny Logville, where everybody knows your business before you do. And they knew what was going on. People started to talk, and it got back to my family. Now, I told you that my family gave me everything that I wanted. That I had all of my wants, I had all of my needs, everything. And being from a small town, if your family is in a little bit of position, you're kind of looked at a little bit different. Not necessarily bad, but people know that you're from a certain station. Now, my stepfather was the town doctor. So that kind of set our family apart from the rest of the folks there. There was a little bit of a stigma there. Well, that's Doc's boy. You better get out of here. I'm going to tell your daddy. That was the sort of mentality there in Localville. And since everybody does know your business there and they do talk about you, it didn't take long to all the stories about what I'd been doing started to get back to my family. My family, they love me. Most of our families do. Some don't, but most of them do. And they did what any good, enabling family would do. They covered up for me. They paid my bills. They paid off loans that I had. They bought my groceries. They basically took care of everything that I was supposed to be taking care of. Everything that a man is supposed to be doing for himself, they did for me, so I would continue to use. See, I was, at this time, in my early 20s, and had no responsibilities whatsoever. I had no rent, I had no car payment, because I had all those things given to me. So I could devote my time, all of my full attention to getting high and chasing dope. And that's what I did. And, it didn't get better. It didn't get better at all. And I'm sure most of you know that. You can all look back over your own lives and see how it never gets better. It's just a question of how quickly it's going to get bad. Now, with me being the overachiever that I am, it got bad very quickly. So, with my first arrest, which they bonded me out, they smoothed over, went to court, got a slap on the wrist. I think it was maybe 6 months probation or something that I never went to, never took any drug tests for, probably unsupervised. After that, my parents sent me to rehab for the first time. I went to, it was New Life Lodge over in Dixon. I think it's called something else now, but it was still New Life. Mirror Lake.
Sorry.
So I went there, and I had a good time. I made a lot of friends. And I made some really good friends. When you're in treatment, even if you don't want to be there, you'll make some good friends. You always find some people that you have a brotherhood and a camaraderie with that you can relate to. And I didn't know it at the time, but looking back on it, that was the first time I ever had that. Because when you're out doing the dope game and doing all the running and chasing and getting high, you think that you have friends, you think that you have people that you can confide in, but most of them are gone if you don't have money or you don't have dope. But when I got there to treatment, I had a brotherhood there. For that 30 days, I had people that I could relate to and I could talk with. So I enjoyed it. And then I went home. And I believe that when I went home, it was on a Friday. It was midday. And maybe I got home about 1 o'clock. Within 2 hours, I was high. See, because I knew where I had stashed some things before I left. Probably inadvertently, because, a lot of times we don't really hide on the stuff like it. If we can help it, we want to use it. But I did leave some things behind for me, and I used when I got home. So I'm sitting here twirling my 30-day chip in my hand while I'm on the phone making calls to go meet up with somebody. Went right back to it. Now, I know I already said that about how things get worse, and they get worse quickly. Once you first go to treatment, it seems like it's not a long time before you end back up in treatment. In other words, once you kind of cross that threshold, just like the first time you get arrested, it kind of starts you on a path where it's going to happen over and over again. And it certainly did with me. For the next 5 years, I went to a total of 6 different treatment centers. Back to New Life. I think I went to Tennessee Christian, Bradford, and Alabama. I went to some unnamed halfway house type program, which turned out to be a scam, but I went anyway. And I went to, and I can't even remember all of them, really. I don't know if I've fried a lot of my brain cells or if it's just so much things that I can't really remember. But I never, in all of that time of going to all these different treatment centers, I never stayed sober after I got home. I would do really well while I was there. I think in 2 of the places I became, I think what I heard it called here is a community leader. I was a mayor in one of them. I rose up through some sort of position, and I had a decent position there. Helping out, helping the counselors, kind of running interference between everybody, and functioned and lived very well while I was there. See, all of my circumstances had changed. See, where I was at, that had changed. The legal troubles, most of them went away. Not all of them, but most of them did. The people that I was surrounded with, that changed. But I hadn't changed. I was still the same person that went in. The only difference was I wasn't using anything anymore. And every time I would get out, I think the last place that I went, that was Buffalo Valley, was the last place that I went. I went up in Clarksville. They got a 2-month program up there. That was the last place I went that time. And as soon as I left, I stayed for anything. I'm not particularly smart. I can't remember a lot of things. And then when I get up to tell part of my story, there is so much garbage and junk from my past. It's not that I pass over certain things, I just forget it. And then I tell someone else, and I have new information, it seems like to me. But once I left there at Buffalo Valley, I'd stayed a good year. I went through the 2-month program. After that, I went through their halfway house. I worked as a mentor. I taught classes. I did all of the things that were expected of me and more. But as soon as I left, I got high. And I have done just about every single drug known to man. And those that I have not done, it is only because that I could not get them. Because I always wanted to try new things. I always wanted to do bigger and better and go harder and go farther. But this was, when I left Buffalo Valley that time, that was the first time in my life that I started shooting cocaine. Now, I don't know if any of you have that sort of experience, but there's not a safe way to do cocaine. It's not a safe and acceptable sort of drug to be doing where, you know, your life's going to go very well. But when you start on the needle with anything, things get out of control really quick. I mean, it completely changes who you are right down to your DNA. And with me stepping out and starting on IV cocaine, that happened really quick. You know, I'm not that muscular of a guy. I mean, obviously. You know, I don't look like I'm very strong, but I can carry a TV. I mean, I could carry a safe. I could carry anything that you had in the house, and I mean, I could run with it. And as soon as I started on that cocaine, that is exactly what I started. I mean, I started robbing people. Now, most of the people that I robbed, and you know, a lot of times, you know, they talk about war stories, and you know, AA, NA, any sort of meeting, and how destructive they are. And you know that when most of us tell war stories that we're kind of putting our big dog on, you know, everybody's back. You know, I've never been in jail with somebody that got busted with a gram. Everybody got busted with kilos. And you know, they were El Chapo of Middle Tennessee. You know, everybody's a hardened criminal. You know, so when we tell our stories like that, it's always how bad we are and how much worse we were than everybody else. But I don't even know where I was going with that. I just felt like telling what a scumbag that I was. You know, Paul says that about himself, and I know this is a faith-based recovery group. This is a faith-based treatment center. So you're hearing scripture. And you know, there's I think it's in Timothy, maybe it's 1st or 2nd, where Paul says, this is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptation. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. Now, I was just arrogant enough to read and hear something like that to think, no, it's me. I'm worse than you. I'm the chief sinner, and would go out of my way to prove it. And see, you ever heard somebody say that there's nothing worse than having a head full of AA and a belly full of liquor? Or they might say a little different, NA, you know, having a head full of NA and, you know, body full of dope, or something to that effect. If you have been raised in church, a church environment, you've heard scripture, you've heard preaching, that makes the life of a drug addict very miserable. Because no matter how hardened that you are, no matter how good things go, no matter how much money, how many women that you have, you always have that in the back of your mind, and it eats away at you. I was raised in church. You know, I told you about my great-grandfather, who was the town drunk that became the pastor. Everyone else in my family was pastors. My grandfather, my uncle, my dad is sort of kind of pastor now. And then all the other people, all the other uncles, you know, they're pastors, they're worship leaders. And then they've got the black sheep, me, that's living there in Perry County. But growing up in church like that, see, I knew all of those things. You know, I'd heard the gospel preached, I'd heard scriptures preached to me. So much so that, you know, when I would get in that broken state, that despairing state, you know, wanting life to change, but, you know, having no idea of how that would ever happen, I would start to remember those scriptures. I'd start to remember things that, you know, pastors and teachers had told me, and man, that is miserable. I mean, to be high thinking about church, that is absolutely miserable. And you've already got enough shame and degradation and regret, but to be thinking about church while you're high, that's a special load right there. It really made me feel miserable. But we'll go back to what I was just talking about. You know, I was talking about running with TVs and running with safes and doing all of that sort of thing. And I started to get into worse trouble then. Because theft's a crime. And no matter who your daddy is, no matter what town that you live in, it will catch up with you and they will prosecute you. And finally, I got in enough trouble where they couldn't buy me out anymore. I was going to have to do either a lot of time or a lot of treatment. So which one do you think I chose? I'm going to do treatment. You know, I don't really think I'm tough enough to go to prison, so I'll go to treatment. And I did. And I did really well, just like every other time that I went. You know, some of you may be here because you want to be here. Now, some of you may be here because the court wants you to be here. And so you've been strongly encouraged to attend. And I know there's kind of a stigma that, well, it's really only the people that want to go to treatment. They're the only ones that make it. So that's not true. I actually read the statistics, and the very fact that you go makes you just as likely to succeed as anyone else. Whether you're court mandated or whether you can't wait to get here, you still have the same opportunity, the same chances of succeeding as anything else. But after I finally got all of that trouble out of my way, I did have to go to probation that time. They didn't give me the option to not go. Sorry. All of my dealers that I had, they either went to jail or some of them died. So I was kind of left to find some new sources. Now, sometimes that's difficult. From what I read anymore, it's not too difficult, but it was difficult at that time in Perry County. And the reason I say that is because if you want to get high, how many of you know you're going to get high? You're going to find a way to get high on something. It doesn't matter what it is. So all of those old dealers, the heroin and the morphine, most of them were dead. So, and then I'm in Perry County, there's no cocaine, so I had to find something else. And what I found is what most of you have found, and what makes the news every single night, which is methamphetamine. Now, I had already had all these years of doing dirt, getting in trouble, running everybody off from me. So the patience that everyone had with me was worn pretty thin at this point. And when you start on methamphetamine, just like you start any on the other speed, especially IV, you become a different person really quick. Your whole psyche changes. Even when you're not on it, who you are has changed. You're just a completely different person. You don't even look the same when you look at those pictures, when you see those movies of yourself. And I became the type of person, as if I wasn't one already, became the type of person that my mother, my grandmother, and all my family used to warn me about. Don't talk to that person. Don't go around them. That's who I was. And it's, a small town like Hohenwald, it's just got, I think the town itself has a few hundred people. You can't really avoid people there. It's not like New York or someplace where people never see you. You see everybody every day, the grocery store, through Main Street. And so I'm in this little town where everybody knows me, everybody knows my family. And when they see me coming, they will get out of the way and go somewhere else. Now, we don't even have sidewalks in Perry County, but people would still get off the road and kind of walk. They'd walk through the grass, anything they could do to get away from me. Because I was either going to rob them, I was going to lie to them to manipulate them and get some money out of them, or make a fool out of myself, trying to talk to them and tell them how good I was doing while I'm scratching and moving, all over my feet. Which, as you can see, I still move around a whole lot. I don't know if that's part of living that way for several years or if I'm just kind of wired that way. But I was talking with a friend before this meeting started, and he was talking about some problems that he had developed from IV drug use. Now, there's a lot of things that happen with IV drug use. Now, I know some of these things they're unpleasant to hear, and I think the way that they're even talked about a lot is that they're triggers, that triggers me to hear it. And that's not my intention with anybody, but I want to be realistic and tell you exactly the way it was, because all of us know exactly how it is. So I think we can be open about those sort of things. But there's a lot of problems that come with IV drug use. Not just the usual things that come with addiction, but a lot of health problems where you start getting sick all the time. All the time. That's just what your life is, 24/7, sick in one way or another. You start losing huge amounts of weight. You start losing teeth. And I didn't know if anybody wanted me to be real personal, but as you can see, my teeth look pretty good. And they're not mine. Yeah, those were a gift, so I had to get some that were replaced because mine were all falling out of my head. But about 7 years ago, close to 8, I was in the house one night, and this is where I was going with this long roundabout story about looking for new highs and new things to do when the old sources dried up. See, all the usual drugs I couldn't get those anymore, so I was mainlining meth and anything else. And one night, down in the basement, shooting up methamphetamine. And as soon as I did, I knew something was wrong. Not an overdose, not somebody put some whatever in there that makes you kind of sick. But my whole hand went numb. Not that fun kind of numb where this is great pins and needles, but that scary kind of numb where it was just like it wasn't there. And that was this hand right here. Now, one of the last things that any of us want to do when we're in addiction is to tell on ourselves, to let anybody know that we're doing it. Now, when your stepdad's a doctor, you're sure not going to tell them anything that you're doing. You got to hide from those kind of people because they know the signs, they know what they can spot it a mile away. So I hid my hand for almost a week. Now, it was numb. Of course, they didn't really expect a whole lot of work out of me anyway, so it wasn't out of the ordinary for me not to really be participating in things. But I had to hide it because not only was it numb, it was starting to swell. It was starting to get dark. And finally, about day 8, it was about this dark right here. And I went upstairs. I said, "Mom, I think I might need to go to the doctor." She said, "Why? What's wrong?" And I just pulled my hand out from behind my back. And she fell to pieces. Now, Mom at this time had already been through a lot, like we put all of our mothers through, but that was a shock to her. She started making phone calls, and first thing my stepfather did, he came and looked at me. Been a physician for years, operated on people, saved lives, delivered babies, done all the things that physicians do. He took one look at me and he said, "Get in the car. We're going to Nashville." We weren't stopping at the hospital there in Perry County. He said, "We're going directly to Nashville." Now I went into that room, the ER room. They took one look at me and they said, "Stay right here, Mr. Barber." Now, I'm already scared to death. I'm already, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if they're calling the cops. But, too bad. I really can't do anything anyway. So they had to call in a couple of specialists to come look. They come in and looked at me, and they said, "We're gonna have to do surgery." Now, my surgeon, he told me very clearly. He said, "I think you might lose your arm." Now, I'd already been through a lot, had a lot of different things happen in my life, had a lot of hurt at that point, but being told that you're going to lose your arm, or might lose your arm, is absolutely terrifying. So they rolled me down the hallway, and I'll never forget this doctor was a really kind-hearted, very godly man. He stops before we get in the operating room, and he prays with all the other doctors and nurses. And he prays with me. I'm crying, oh, I'm so sorry. I feel so terrible, and thanks. And then the meds hit, and I'm out. I woke up the next day in my hospital bed. And they keep you pretty well medicated after surgery. And having my long drug history, that meant that I was feeling pretty good. I was in a good mood when I woke up. Until I tried to move. And I'm hooked up. All these cords. I've got, you know how it is in a hospital. You've got things all over the chest. Wearing one of those little gowns. It's got the opening in the back. I couldn't move because I was tethered to all these IVs next to me. Now, I couldn't feel anything that was different. I was all bandaged up. It was huge. About 2 days into that recovery phase, my doctor came in and says, would you like to see what we did? Sure. I had my Dilaudid buzz going. I was in a really good mood. I said, sure, I can take it. He pulls out his phone and shows me the pictures of what used to be my arm. And it looked just like if any of you are deer hunters, and when you gut a deer and you hang him up, the way that skin looks, where all the blood's been pulled out of it, that's what my arm looked like. My thumb was gone. My forefinger was gone. And he had cut, I can show some of you the scar later, he had cut it open all the way up to almost my elbow. That was a hard thing to see. My life had not been one of success at that point anyway. I didn't have a career, I didn't have a wife and kids. I had kids, but they were scattered. I didn't have the normal things of how am I going to work, how am I going to support myself. But still, seeing that I had been permanently and irrevocably maimed really hit me hard. Not hard enough to stop using, but it hit me hard. See, because they sent me home with a whole bunch of medicine and several scripts. And I think I already asked this question, that, how many of you know that if you want to get high, you'll get high? You can find out how to shoot dope. If you're right-handed and they cut off your right hand, you'll find out how to do it with your left. And within a week of getting to the house, that's exactly what I was doing. At this time, I didn't even know how to write with my left hand. I'd always done office work and different things. I didn't know how I was going to type, but I figured out how to shoot dope within that first week. And the next, it took a good, I think it was 6 to 9 months of a recovery period from all that. All these antibiotics, all the dressing changes. But that whole time, I was using those pills that they gave me. And, hey, this might be a trigger warning too, but I know that some of you have done it. I can't be the only person that is. Where they give them to you, and you'll kind of cup them under your tongue. I had dentures, I could cup them under that, And then I took those out later to shoot. Because, hey, I've got a doctor in the family. They're going to stand there and make sure I take my meds, and I don't take off with them. But I just put them back there in the back of my mouth so I could go shoot them up. Because I had to. I absolutely felt that I had to. I had to find some way to do it, and I did. I know I'm kind of all over the place, but hey, I didn't bring any notes for that. We're just talking. And, we're just, we've all got stories. And whatever I think that I'm going to say when I get an opportunity to speak, it changes by the time I get up here. And just before we got started, you're making the announcements about Mother's Day. And I always think about my mother on Mother's Day because she's dead. Now, my mother's been dead about a year after this happened to me. maybe 2, that's when my mother started to get really sick. And the whole time I'm still using. I'm still using. You know, mom is sick, not on her deathbed yet, but she's getting to where she can't really function, and she's still taking care of me. You know, she's still paying my bills off. She's still paying off my debts. She's still making sure I get through probation, or she takes me to town while her body is starting to give out on me. And, you know, my mother never saw me. She never saw me after I was saved. She never saw me. She never saw me really get sober and my life change. But she saw plenty of bad stuff. She saw plenty of bad stuff. And finally, when she did die, and I know I'm maybe bumming some people out, but I'm just telling you about my mother and how that affected me. Because some of you may have had a similar situation, similar kind of story. When my mother finally died, we were all there at the house. And she had been sick, but we had no idea how sick. We didn't know the gravity of what was going on with her. And the next morning, when she got up to take my kids to school, because you know I wasn't going to do it, she wasn't breathing. So we called my stepfather, who had called, and he also called the ambulance and sent everybody up there. He comes in with the EMTs, and he's working on my mother. Now, I'd always worked in the office. I'd always done CNA work, some things in the medical field, so I knew CPR. So he had me doing CPR on her. And she died. She died right there, literally in front of me, while we're doing CPR on her. Now that's terrible. That's terrible in the best of circumstances for somebody's mother to die right in front of them. But certainly in this one. You want to know what I did? When they loaded her up on the gurney and took her down the stairs to tote her off to the funeral home, I got her Xanax out of the drawer. I don't know what sort of justification that I gave myself, or even if I bothered at that point. But see, that's what I was going to do. I mean, it was a given. I was always going to find a way to get high. And so, when I should have been grieving my mother, who literally just died right there in front of me, I'm stealing. I'm getting high with her medicine. And once Mom died, and I think of these things a lot, especially around this time of year, around Mother's Day. But once Mom died, she was my last holdout, my last enabler, my last major enabler. She was the last enabler that had money. She could get me out of trouble. And once she died, my stepfather, who had raised me from a young kid, about like one of those kids back there, had taken care of me, bonded me out of jail, took me to treatment. He had finally had enough. And he didn't have my mother telling him just give him another chance. So he did the most loving thing possible for me. He did the best thing for me at that moment in my life that he could have ever done. He put me out. Don't call, don't come around, got a restraining order. You'd think that would be enough to give me a wake-up call, to get sober. I neglected to mention in this time I went to 3 more treatment centers. So, like I said, I forget certain details, so I've been to a total of 9. So I pretty well knew what to do, or at least had an idea, as far as, you know, like doing the things that they tell you to do that work, keep you sober. So you would think that then that would have been a wake-up call, but it wasn't. I did what I always did. I found another way to get high. I found other sources. I found other people that I could manipulate. Now, Mom's gone. Stepdad's gone. Not only is he's gone, he has paperwork that says not to come around. So all of those financial backers and enablers that I had, they're non-existent at this point. That means when I get in trouble, I'm going to have to face the consequences. And that didn't take very long. It didn't take very long to get in trouble. And I finally caught my first felony, which is my only felony, but that was enough. And there was no more slap on the wrist at that point. There was no more 1129, just come back every once in a while. They wanted me to come every week for a drug test. So they put me on community corrections for that. Now, community corrections, if any of you've ever been on it, it's usually a year on that part of the program, and then you kind of step down where you have more freedom. I made it 3 weeks. Every week that I went, I failed my drug screen. Now my PO, of course, we all think that we're good liars when we're out there, that we're good manipulators. But come to find out, he had actually been discharged from the Army from hunting terrorists in Afghanistan. So he's not somebody that's easily manipulated. He's not somebody that you can pull the wool over his eyes and get away with things. That doesn't mean that I didn't try. It just didn't go very well. So after that third drug screen, they violated me. Now, this is the part of the story I like to talk about. Every story that you have, if any of you get to give your testimony, it's always got 3 major points. It's got what we used to be like, and then what happened, and what we're like now. And then most of the time when we're telling the stories, we spend a lot of that time what we used to be like. You're kind of laying the groundwork of why the rest of the story is so good. And then we, talk a lot about what happened, and I know I took quite a bit of time laying that out there, what did happen to me. But before we get into what I'm like now, I want to tell you about my incarceration. Now, I know people, had some really good friends that I met. They've done 20 years total in the penitentiary. Maybe they've done 30. One of my best friends had, when he would shave his head in jail, he had tattoos, flames, all down the side of his head, and an eyeball tattooed right back here with words that said, "I see you," right here on the back. Had sleeves up, and tatted everywhere. But he had done, I think, total about 20-something years. The longest stretch I ever did was 6 months. That was a long time. That was a long time for me. Now, I know some of you may have done a whole lot longer and say, "Man, that's nothing," but that's a long time for me. And after a lifetime of doing this, of going to jail, of going to rehab, of going to church, getting baptized 2, 3, I think maybe 4 times. I have to do everything a couple times just to make sure it sticks. I'd done all that. Hearing all that preaching, hearing all the scripture, hearing all that. When I finally got to jail and had to stay there, that is when I finally, I don't know how to explain it adequately, but I'll do the best that I can. I just believed God at that moment. See, a lot of times when we get in trouble, like I would do when I get in trouble, is we bargain with God. I think they call them foxhole prayers. You get me out of this, I'll do better. You get me out of this, I'll never go back. Or, God, I'll change. I just want you to do this first. You give this much, and then I'll give this much. See, but I didn't have that at this point. I just believed him for who he was. It's like, hey, I know that you're real, because I never really doubted that. And I know that you can save me, and I know that you will, and I don't care what happens. Now, I've always been pretty lazy. most of my life, other than when I was running with TVs. And I've watched a lot of movies, and I've seen a lot of Christian movies. And, you know, when people get saved in prison, there's usually like some technicality that happens, or, you know, a judge retired, you know, something, and they get out of jail, and they go on to live happy, productive lives. It happens really quickly. It didn't happen that way for me. I got saved after being in jail for about a month, and they kept me there. They kept me there for the next 5 months. And I want to tell you, still to this day, you know, I have opportunity to serve the church that I go to, recovery ministry, I work in a ministry, I'll get to that in a minute. But that 5 months that I was in there in jail was some of the best times of my life. Not so much for the company, but for the fact of just being there and getting a routine, getting up at a certain time, going to bed at a certain time, eating every day. You know, those kind of routines that we take for granted now. See, I didn't have any of that. It was completely undisciplined. And every day when we were there in the pod, we would meet up around one of the little tables right after breakfast, and we had Bible study. And it was a fun Bible study because, you know, it's not really the different groups of people in a small county jail like that are not separated from each other. You've got all the different gangs there together, and you've got all the different denominations. And so I'm sitting at Bible study with my friend that is, I think they called it can't even remember. There's some sort of rank, but he was a Crip. Then I had my other buddy, who was an OG gangster disciple. I do remember that term. And then my other guy that sat across the table from me, that was from the Aryan Brotherhood. That was a real interesting Bible study. Now, you know, we kind of got past those differences pretty quickly. It was the denominational differences that were harder. Well, I'm raised Church of Christ. I'm raised Pentecostal. You know, well, I don't know if I can talk to you. You know, never mind the fact that, you know, you're a Crip and I'm a blood, you know, that we'll look past that. But see, we didn't have opportunity to do anything else, go anywhere, so we managed to work through it. And it was those differences that we probably learned the most from, being different, having different perspectives. So finally, they got tired of me, and I was able to leave. They were going to reinstate me on community corrections. And I'm not sure if it was a joke, but they told me that I was going to lose all of my street time. And that was 3 weeks. So it wasn't that big of a deal, really. But when they reinstated me, my PO told me that there was a local recovery group. That's the church I attend now. They had just started a month prior. And he said, they meet on these days. This is the group leader. You need to be there. And so I went. And it was a lady. I met her husband later. But come to find out, see, when I was there in jail, we'd go out on the yard, we would see this lady walking around the perimeter, and she had her Bible in her hand. Well, you know, what's she doing? So, she goes around and prays for the jail once a week. That was that lady. That was the head of the recovery group. Some of this story may have been weird, but it's about to get really weird, especially with these people I just mentioned. So I got plugged into this group. And I know that while you're here, you're automatically plugged in to their group. But when you finish your time here, find a group. Any group. I don't care. If it's a CR, if it's an AA, if it's an NA, if it's AAA, find a group and meet the people there and plug yourself in. Because, you know, cliches are cliches for a reason. When you've heard that meeting makers make it, it's absolutely true. You may not have to be there every time the door opens, but you need to be there some. And do it the first day you get out. So I met this lady. And got to hear about, oh, that's the lady from jail. I thought that was just so amazing. And most of the people that were volunteers at that recovery group went to the Baptist church. Now, I don't know if any of you are Baptist, but when you show up at a Baptist church, you automatically volunteer for something. Maybe one, maybe two, maybe three different committees are going to put you to work. And there was all sorts of things that needed to be done in that recovery group. I couldn't really do a whole lot. Didn't have a lot of traditional work skills that were needed, like construction or different things, but I had office skills, I had research skills, and they happened to need some of that, so I got into working pretty heavily with all of them. And in the process of doing that, and this is why it's so important to get plugged into a group like that, to volunteer to do, it's not to do the work. Anybody can sweep the floor, anybody can make coffee. But when you put yourself in that position and you volunteer for something and you take on that responsibility, it builds more character than anything else in your life. People start to depend on you. You start to depend on yourself. I got to be there. I've got to be there to do this. And in the process of doing that, you start to make friends, close friends, really close friends. And all of us there, small group though it was, we started to get really close. Now, things are going good. I still didn't have a driver's license, so I had to be shuttled everywhere. If I was going to work somewhere, the lady that I'm talking about, her name is Sarah. So Sarah is the one that took me everywhere. Now, she would pick me up in the morning, take me to a job, come pick me up, bring me home. And I'm fresh out of jail, so I thought that was really kind of foolish on her part, but I was really glad that she did. And I got to be really close with her, got to talk with her, got to talk with her husband. And they always had some new opportunities, some new little jobs that I could do to help out. And she helped me kind of do some networking, get references and some things together so I could get my first job. Not my first job I've ever had in my life, but this is the first job that I ever went to consistently and actually did a good job. And it was right over here at Buffalo Valley. I worked there in the call center. And that is such a blessing to work there. I'm saved, I'm on fire, life is really good, I'm happy that I can drive again, and I'm working at a job where I'm talking to people that are most of the time on their last leg, talking to mamas and grandmamas that are crying, and some of them are yelling, trying to help their son, their daughter, and I'm right there in the middle of it, right there on the front lines. It was such a blessing to be there. And after about a year and a half, another opportunity came up. There's a local ministry there in Perry County where this pastor and author, he's been in ministry about 50 or 60 years, writes books and does DVDs, has a huge YouTube channel. They had a position that came open in their office. So there I am. And I'm getting to do, not that I didn't love working at Buffalo Valley, but, I'm getting to do ministry. I'm getting to be literally on the front lines of a ministry that's working in prisons, treatment centers, sending missionaries and evangelists all over the world. And I don't know if this is really related, but I still think it's funny. Most of the group there are homeschooled. They grew up homeschooled. Their parents homeschooled them. And most of them are pretty good church folks. I'm the only recovery person there. I'm the only jailbird, as they like to say. So I'm still unique wherever I'm at, But to be right there at the front line of that, it gives me a real sense of purpose and initiative, to get up and to want to be there during the day. I can't wait to get there. And I don't know what kind of jobs that all of you are going back to, or what kind of job you're going to get, but it's really true what they say. You find something that you love doing, it's not really work. It's like, man, I can't believe they pay me to be here because I would do this if it was just for fun. So I promised you that it was going to get weird, so it is going to get weird. the lady that I was talking about, Sarah, when I was unable to drive and she was having to shuttle me everywhere, we had a Christmas parade there in Loganville. Now, she called and said she couldn't make it. She couldn't come pick me up. So she sent her daughter to come pick me up. And I didn't really like her very much. Her personality is just way different than mine. And I'm a little more reserved right now, but I'm very talkative and I'm very over the top and move a lot with my hands. And she's kind of a quiet person, so it's that's just fine. Thank you for the ride. But we got to be friends after that. When she knew or she had friends or her friends, family members, if they were looking for treatment or something, or they were looking for meetings, she would call me and we would kind of talk business, talk shop about it. But after about 2 years of that, I figured out I really liked talking to her. We had a whole lot we actually didn't have a whole lot in common, but we were just, we had developed a really strong bond in that 2 years. So, I hadn't dated anybody the whole time that I'd been sober. And when Anna and I started dating, I guess it was getting close to around 3 years when we actually started to date, We ended up getting married. Now, we had that really strong friendship that built up, and I've already told you, and I'm sure that you've seen from listening to me talk for a few minutes, I'm a pretty awkward person. Never been married, never had the home life and that home structure. But she put up with it. She put up with the awkwardness, and we were able to just kind of hit it off even though we were so vastly different. So we got married, and in the last 6 months, I'm telling you, 6 months must be a thing for me because I can go really bad or really good within 6 months. But in the last 6 months, my life looks completely different than it did before. And it was good then. I enjoyed my life then. We just bought a house. And I've told you about the job that I got that I love so much. We built a family and a life together. And it's just unreal. I didn't think that I would ever be able to get a house. And, hey, this is a funny God story. I was still having to stay there at my grandmother's house. And I was going out for a walk because, I've got to keep up this muscular figure. So I was going out for a walk one morning, and there was a house that had a for sale sign. Now, I'm thinking in my mind, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to get a house. Not with my credit and all the past history that I have. Stopped in there and talked to the guy, and within a year, that's the house that we bought. What should have been impossible became a reality. It blows my mind to still think about it to this day. And if you're still in the middle of all of your stuff and dealing with a lot of the consequences, family consequences or legal consequences, and you hear people tell their stories, and it's like, yeah, everything's so great, and I got this great job, and I got a house and all that. Shut up. I don't care. I've got bills, I've got this, I've got, 100 years on paper. I don't care about your good life. And I'm not telling you that to brag on myself or because I'm so special. And I'm not telling you either that that's what your life is going to look like. It may be a lot harder. It may be even better. I don't know. But I am telling you that when you leave here, even while you are here, your life does not have to be the same. If you have never heard somebody tell you that you don't have to get high, that you don't have to live the life of a drug addict, you're hearing it now. You don't. This is one of the few treatment centers that I have not been to. But I know plenty of the people that work here, that volunteer here, that pour a lot into this program. And I know that being here, you have every opportunity to succeed. To not only do the normal sober things, put on some weight and get everything out of your system, kind of rewire your brain a little bit, but you get to hear the gospel. You get to hear the word taught to you day in and day out. And I want to encourage you as strongly as I possibly can, and all of you, to make every opportunity of that while you're here. Soak in as much as you can. Because when you leave, I don't know how much newspapers and nightly news that you get here, but the world is not getting better at all. You know, even here in this little small town, the small town that I'm from, it's getting darker every single day. You know, things that you didn't used to hear about, that was just for some place like New York or Memphis or somebody that was big. It's right down the street. It's very serious. It's the most serious thing that you could possibly think of. I mean, people are dying. People dying right here that we know, that we love, our family, our friends. So it's very serious. It's a very serious matter. So while you're here, soak all of that up that you can. Take it with you when you leave. And when you leave, plug into the first group that you can find. If you don't like them, it's not the mob. You don't have to stay forever. You can go to a different group, but find one and get involved as soon as you leave here. You don't have to go back to the same life that you did. Because after, you know, I know this is a year-long program, so some of you are getting ready to graduate. Some of you maybe have just gotten here. And if you've just gotten here, you've gotten a little bit of taste of what that's like, that new life. And there's more to it. You know, Scripture says that God is transforming us from glory to glory. And for those of us that like bigger and better and more, that's exactly what He's doing for us. He's giving us more blessings, more friends, more opportunities every single day. Because there's nothing there back for us to go to. There's the old life that we were. It's not there. That's why I'm going to sit here. I'm going to shut up. He was kind of ready to get up. Maybe cut it off. One of my favorite scriptures, and it's 2 Corinthians 5:17. It says, "Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new." Amen. All things are become new. That's our reality. Our reality is a new creature, a son, someone that belongs, someone that is accepted by God, someone that's seated with Him in heavenly places right now, someone that has been, we're people that have been completely delivered and completely changed. Now sometimes we feel it, and most of the time we don't. But nevertheless, that's our reality, because that's God. That's what God says about us. And that's something that you have to hold on to, because our minds lie to us, our hearts definitely lie to us, the world lies to us, and tells us that you're still who you used to be. You know, you haven't really changed. Did you really get saved? Did God really say that? I mean, He's been saying that for a while. Did God really say that? And you have to hold on to that. That's why I said while you're here, to soak up all the scripture, all the teaching, all the mentorship that you can. Because when those things hit, not if, but when, you can hold on to the truth of God's word and know that you are a new creature, because He said so and that He's delivered you. That's all. Thanks.